again.
Hi.
This is my third hour class.
Okay.
They're super excited to see you.
There we go.
Okay, well again, I'm just going to let the kids get going.
Okay. You know what? Would each of you introduce yourselves as you come up with your question? Just give me your first name.
So let's start with Jackson.
Hi, I'm Jackson.
How do you do?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Where do you find the inspiration in your books, and why do you choose to write about different countries instead of the US, and how did you decide on those specific countries?
Okay. So my son, Matt, now who is a first grade teacher, but was a teenager when I was writing, when I started writing, would say, "Mom, where do you come up with the ideas for these books? What do you do? Google the word sad?" Because the topics are strong, they're intense, they're hard for people, and it's a choice, I think, when you read a book like this. It isn't easygoing, but it's what matters to me. And I feel like if I'm going to spend 2 years on a book project, or if I'm going to apply my talent to something, I want it to really matter. I want it to try to make a difference. So that is why I write these books. I was telling the group before yours that I wish I could write Captain Underpants, but I can't. As my son will be the first to tell you, I'm not funny. So this is the kind of book that I need to read myself, and therefore I guess it's the kind of book I need to write. Why write about countries other than the United States? It isn't like I say, how can I figure out a way to get to Cambodia? I know I'll write a story about the genocide. I'm not like an adventurous traveler necessarily. The stories came to me and grabbed a hold of me, and I couldn't not go. So it was a little challenging, actually, to go to India and Nepal and Cambodia. But I did it because it spoke to me so profoundly. I mean, I have written a couple stories about things that would be, United States based. The first book I ever did is a book called Cut, and it's about a girl who cuts herself. And again, it's a really tough topic, but I felt like it was something that had not been addressed and was not understood, and that the girls who were doing this were often doing it in secret, and were misunderstood and kind of suffering because they were misunderstood. So that's why I wrote that book. And I forget the third part of the question now.
I think you answered it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Izzy, you want to?
Oh, sure. Hello, I'm Izzy.
Hi.
So what was your writing process like? How long did it take you to write your books? And did you ever come across writer's block?
Mm-hmm. Each book takes about 2 years or so to write. And I do a lot of research before I go. I try to read everything I can about the country that I'm going to visit so I can be a respectful visitor. I watch every movie that's about the countries that I'm visiting. And I visit because I need to go there. I need to soak up all that sensory information that makes a book really come alive for the reader. So by going someplace, for instance, whether the dirt on the ground is red and sticky and like clay, or is it like powder and tan and it washes away as soon as the rain hits it. Things like that. You have to go. You have to do the research. You can't just read about it on the internet. So I always do really intensive in-country research. And then I come home, and it takes me a good year and a half to then pull the book together. And my writing process is 8 a.m. yoga every day. Then I come home and go straight to my computer. And I try to work nonstop until after lunch. I have a really nice husband who brings me lunch, and who brought me coffee this morning. But if I'm so distracted, if I get up to make lunch, you know, I can go on to online shopping, I can FaceTime with my sister. There's no end to the distractions. So if I really nail myself to the chair practically, that's when the work gets done. And I find that I get in the flow, and then I'll look up and I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's 1 o'clock, I'm starving. Now, that's not to say that there aren't days where I'm up here and I'm still going online and I'm still trying to call my sister and I'm still trying to goof off. It's hard. You have to create all the discipline and all the impulsion to do this work yourself. It's not like there's a boss who says, okay, give me 3 pages today. You have to be your own boss. And sometimes the boss says, we're going to take a nap. Sometimes the boss says, we're going to go out for brownies. But most of the time, the boss says, stay at your desk. And that's hard because I turn off all outside stimulation. I don't even use music because I find I get too easily drawn into the lyrics of a song. So I work all day, I take a nap, and then in the afternoon, I do emails and I pay my bills, and I run errands, and I do all the things that don't require a really fresh mind. And then sometimes after dinner, I'll come back and look at what I've written and review it and see, does it look different now a few hours later? Something I closed the computer on at 2 in the afternoon I thought was really great may look pretty crummy at 7, or something that I thought was not so hot at 3. I figure out how to fix it at 7 just because I've stepped away from it. So that's my writing process. I do get writer's block. Everybody does. And sometimes it's a matter of just pushing through it and writing something crummy as a placeholder until you can come back and write something good. Even bad words on a page are better than no words on a page. I write in my diary many mornings just to get out all the self-criticism, what made you think anybody was going to buy this book, what made you think you could write it, all that doubt and worry. And sometimes I'll be writing in my diary thinking, that father character is just not believable. He's too stiff. He doesn't feel fully rounded. He must also be partly a nice guy. And next thing I know, I'll find my way into a solution just by writing questions down or by writing the criticisms down. Sometimes I write an imaginary letter to my editor saying, I give up. I can't figure out how to make this scene work. I can't differentiate the characters. There's no action, there's no conflict. And I never send the email, but just by sending out an SOS, I start to find my way to a solution. So I recommend that even if you just write a pretend email to your teacher saying, I can't do this assignment, it's too hard, I don't know how to do X, I don't know how to do Y. The next thing you know, you've figured out at least some way to tackle X or Y. Sometimes I take a walk. That's the solution of last resort, because if I get up and I'm not sitting hunkered down over the computer with my jaw clenched and my shoulders hiked up, if I stand up, all of a sudden everything changes. And some of it I really do believe has to do with your body and how you're using your body in the writing process.
Hi, I'm Jessica.
Hi.
How do you manage to write stories that keep readers hooked even though the topics are difficult to write or read about?
How to keep people hooked, I think, has to do with making sure there continues to be conflict on every page and that you care about the stakes, about what's happening to that character on each page. So if you bring a character to safety temporarily, on the next page or two pages later, you need to show that, oh, that safety was only temporary, or that safety was illusory, or that comfort that she had by finding a friend, or by Arn reaching, one particular, he's running away, gets to one comfortable place. Oh, that's not the end. You've got to keep building things up and then knocking them down. You have to, and I guess I use myself as a read as a test. If I'm reading something and I start to wander away emotionally, you're going to do the same. You're going to skip over that passage, or that's when you're going to put the book down. So people will talk about, why do I write for young readers? And one of the most exciting challenges about writing for people in your age group is this idea of attention. You have a million other things that are more fun to do than read about genocide. So I have to keep your attention on every single page, which makes me write the best possible book that I can write.
Jade?
Hi, I'm Jade.
I do.
What is it like after one of your books has been published, and what effect do your books like Never Fall Down and Sold have on the readers?
It's really exciting when the book comes out. There's a whole, it's staged, so at a certain point the editor says, okay, we're ready to accept this. And before that, though, I get the same kinds of red lines and criticisms on my books and on the manuscripts that I submit that you get on your term papers. My editor will say, this is unclear, I can't follow this here, or give me an example, or this passage goes on too long, or it's repetitive, or whatever. So I think it's important to know that we get the same feedback that you get professional writers do. So after that process, while that process is going on, somebody's designing the cover. And the author usually doesn't have control over the cover image. You are shown the cover with the idea, like, here's what we came up with. We love it. We hope you do too. You're not supposed to say, I don't love it. You're supposed to say, I love it. And usually I do. And I think I'm, smart enough to know that I can write a book, but I'm not a good judge as to what art really grabs a reader. And so I have a lot of respect for the people who do the artistic interpretations that end up as the cover. So there's that. There's this moment of revealing, like, what is this book going to look like? What's the title going to be? I do not love the title Never Fall Down, but we could not come up with a better title. I feel like that captures that sense of you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and it's kind of an inspiring message. The German version of the book is called The Tiger in My Heart, and I actually like that better. So then it comes out, and there are reviews, and I have been very fortunate in my life. I have not gotten negative reviews. They can be devastating. But I've gotten reviews that are less than fabulous, and you want to get an A. You've worked so hard on this. You want everybody to love it. But not everybody does. And these books are not everybody's cup of tea. So it's exciting because you've gone from being invisible for the year, 2 years plus that you've been writing the book, and then suddenly, hopefully, it's everywhere, and then you're invisible again, and it's somebody else's book that is being noticed, and then there's a whole other 2 years of quiet. So you have to kind of get used to that rhythm. And love it for the work, love it for showing up at your computer every day and doing it, and not love it for the reviews. The impact. So I feel like the impact is very personal. You know, when you read a book, each one of you had a different image in your head of what Arn looked like or what Lakshmi went through. And that's really an amazing experience as an author to think that people are carrying those images around. But I think just as important, you now know about trafficking. You now know about genocide. You know about these countries. Hopefully it spurs you to know more, learn more, or possibly do something. Whether you raise a little money to send to Cambodia Living Arts or to send to the anti-trafficking agencies, that's great. Maybe it's just that you're aware that this happens to other kids and that kids are more vulnerable in the world, and that when you're adults and you're in a position to do something, you do. I will never know all the impact that the books have. I wrote a book called Cut, which is about a girl who cuts herself. That book is almost 20 years old. I still get people coming up to me and saying, that book really helped me. Or I was that girl, and I didn't think anybody understood what I was going through. So some of the effects are very personal, and some of them are more political.
Hi, it's Jackson again.
Hi.
How did you just?
How'd you get to go twice? How did you get to go twice?
No one else wants to ask questions. How do you decide to write about the Cambodian genocide, and as opposed to other genocides that happen around the world? And how did you meet Arn and decide to write about his story?
Great question. I guess it was because of Arn that I wrote this book. I met him, and he had this urgency about telling his story, and he wanted the whole world to understand what had happened in Cambodia, which is a forgotten genocide. It doesn't seem right that those two words could possibly go together, but a lot of people don't know about what happened in Cambodia, and that's partly because the Khmer Rouge sealed the borders of the country and nobody could get in. And then when people would come out, very few of them escaped, but when they did come out, nobody believed that it could possibly be that bad. You know, there's a genocide going on in Myanmar right now. The Rohingyas are being driven out and killed and raped and their houses put on fire just because of their religion. So we don't know where, you know, the ways in which people are suffering far from us. And I think it's important to bring those stories to readers in the United States. Let's see, so why write about that? It was really because of Arn, who had to tell this story, but couldn't. His command of English wasn't strong enough that he could write his own book. And his emotional state, when he would go back to recounting what had happened to him and what he did, he would just fall apart and become that little traumatized child all over again. So he needed somebody else to pull that book together for him. And that's how that came about. I feel like I'm forgetting one part of this question.
No, you got it.
Okay.
Chase.
Hello, I'm Chase.
Hi.
So my question is, what inspired you to write Never Fall Down through Arn's dialect?
Mm-hmm.
And was it ever hard to stay through his thought process?
You know, that was the riskiest decision with the book, was to write in his imperfect, or what they call non-standard English. It's kind of risky for a white person to imitate a person of color speaking less than fabulous English. But I tried writing it in perfect sentences, and it was flat. I tried writing it in beautiful sentences, like show-off sentences, like the rice was grasshopper green. And, you know, that was just me showing off that I can write a fancy sentence. And I listened to Arn's voice and I thought, he is so funny and warm and charming, and he is the best tour guide that you could possibly have through this really tough story. It's almost like he's whispering in your ear. And there's enough humor and enough ego. He loves applause. And you gotta love a guy who loves applause, and that's part of what gets him to survive a genocide. So his language was, in many ways, way better than my fancy grasshopper green rice. It is poetic. He says things like, when he gets to the United States and he and his brothers were peeing out the window and saving fruit in the bedroom. He said, my mother went bazooka. Well, that isn't the traditional idiom. The traditional idiom is she went ballistic. But it's so much funnier, it's so much cuter. He says it his way. The danger, I think, is that it could look like I was making fun of him, or that because he's not speaking standard English, he's not that smart. But I feel like that language shows you just how smart he really is. He gambles at the temple. He has a real sense of humor about it. He knows that if he feeds some of the stolen food to the other guys in the band, that he'll stay alive too. I feel like that allows his true emotional intelligence and his strategic thinking to show. If I said it like that, it'd be like me commenting on his traits. Letting him just show them to you in his own language, I think was a lot better. I think it's hard to read though. In the first 10 pages, people are like, huh? But staying in his point of view was the secret to the book, that he didn't know that this was genocide. He was 11, so he knew this much. He had blinders on, like, this is what an 11-year-old knows. Same thing with writing Sold. She doesn't know she's about to be raped. We know. But she is only 13, so you have to stay in that frame of understanding where something terrible is going to happen to this kid. And she's going to feel bewildered, she's going to feel shocked, she's going to feel confused, it's going to hurt physically. Staying in that tight, uncomfortable frame of being a child who's subjected to violence is way more powerful than someone standing outside that experience and describing it to the reader. You go through it with them this way.
Hi, I'm Ryan. My question was, what was the most difficult scene to write in Never Fall Down? And was there a part of Arn's story that you felt was too traumatic to put in the book without making it more reader friendly, I guess?
Okay, good question. The hardest scene to write is the scene with the monkeys, where he's in the jungle and he's run away and he's, finally found a little bit of comfort and a sense of community. He's not alone anymore. He's chattering with the monkeys. They're throwing food down at him. It's such a light, beautiful experience. And that one little monkey crawls up and he's feeling his fur, and his little heartbeat is right next to Arn's heartbeat. He's burrows his head in the monkey's fur. And then in the next scene, he has to kill that monkey because he needs to survive. And it was so painful to write, as the writer, inflicting that kind of violence on an innocent creature, and also inflicting that kind of desperation on Arn. I mean, I didn't inflict it; it really happened. But as the writer, you're kind of like God when you're making it happen on your computer screen. That was such a low moment for him. He felt like an animal. This is what he'd been driven to become, and so that was a really painful scene to write. I didn't leave anything out. That was at Arn's suggestion, Arn's request, actually. He didn't want to feel like he'd hidden anything. There is a scene where the Khmer Rouge soldiers eviscerate a man and take his liver and fry it. That's pretty intense and pretty awful to put in a book for young readers. And we all debated that pretty hard, me and Arn and my editor. But it's truthful, and we decided to leave it in. It needed to be in there to show how desperately hungry they were and how tempting that was to Arn. And I guess it speaks for itself. I'm always aware, though, that when I'm writing for other people's kids. And I have kids, and you don't want to expose any child to something ugly that child or that young person isn't ready for. So I try to write in a way that even though the subject matter is brutal, that it doesn't brutalize the reader. You won't find, dirty words or unnecessary violence in the books. Because I'm not going for a shock value. I'm going for educating you about the human condition. And it's a multifaceted condition, being a human being, and especially being a human being under terrible stress.
Let's switch to sold and
I'm Hannah, and what made you decide to write Sold in a vignette format?
The decision partly came from how hard it was to write the book. When I got back from India, I was really depressed. What I had seen was so heartbreaking and so sickening and so soul-crushing that I didn't feel like I had the ability to do justice to it. It didn't feel like I was up to the challenge. And I felt like a fraud, and I felt like these women had told me their stories, they trusted me with their stories, and I just wasn't up to the challenge of making art out of them. So I started writing just little bits, because it was all I could do. And I couldn't stay with the material for more than a couple hours at a time, and I'd have to go off and do something else. And in fact, I often would go and watch silly movies just to purposefully lift myself up out of the sadness of what I was writing. Because otherwise you can get really pulled into the abyss, as they say. Then I found out that the vignette form also worked for the reader, because it's a hard book to read. And if you are just going to say, okay, well, just read one page. Okay, well, I'll read one more. And on that next vignette, that's only one sentence, so I can manage that one. It gives the reader a little breathing room in the story, a little chance to catch your breath, a little chance to bring your own imagination to the story. And it made me choose only the best word, the right word for each vignette, So it wasn't like I could have these long, windy passages and be undisciplined in the writing. It forced me to write in a really disciplined way and keep it really tight. And I think in the end, it added beauty, I hope, that the poetry, the language is, wherever it can be, it's beautiful. So beautiful language about a very ugly situation.
Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine.
Hi.
What was your biggest concern while you were writing about human trafficking?
I think my biggest concern was that nobody would care. That I would spend all this time and energy, and these people who had this experience would be forgotten. That the book would be too ugly, too sad, too raw for the world, and it would just go unnoticed. And I was very lucky that it was nominated for a National Book Award, which gave teachers and librarians kind of a seal of approval to say, well, okay, if they have deemed this to be a good book, I can bring this into my classroom. I can bring this into my collection in the library. It made it safe for teachers to take on a book that not every parent is going to necessarily want their child to read. There have been very few objections to it in the end, though, in part because, as I said, there isn't graphic language and it's not about shock value. Very few parents have said, I don't want my kids to read this book. My other books, Cut in particular, have been objected to much more often. But I think that was my biggest fear. And in fact, my agent said, oh, great, a book about child trafficking written in poetry, that has bestseller written all over it. But, you know, fortunately, over time, she was wrong. People, your generation really cares. I think people give your generation a bad rap for being, you know, self-absorbed or whatever. I kind of feel like my experience from talking to young readers is that you're very idealistic and motivated to change the world little by little.
Kate.
Hi, I'm Cade.
Hi.
And this is kind of more related to Sold, but it says, what do you think the role of education plays in the probability or likelihood of a person being in human trafficking?
That is such a key question. Education makes all the difference. Poverty is what allows this to happen. A lack of awareness is what allows this to happen. So a girl who is trafficked in the United States, and it happens here, you know, when girls run away or boys run away, within 48 hours, they're usually approached by some kind of sexual predator. And it's not a predator who looks like a, you know, bad guy with a mustache. It's a young, cute guy who says, God, you look cold. Do you want to come to my house for, you know, soup? Or can I buy you a cup of coffee? If you know about trafficking, you're much less susceptible to that happening to you. So it's really about awareness and education. And I think poverty is such a key part of it in countries where families are right on the edge of being able to feed their kids. And so sometimes they send their children away really thinking that they're getting good jobs and that the people to whom they are, quote unquote, selling their kids are going to feed them and house them when the parents really can't. And it's a real desperation effort. But if those families weren't illiterate, if those girls weren't illiterate, if they had some job skills, if they were aware of what really happened, this wouldn't be allowed to take place. The other thing that's worth knowing is that the men who go to the brothels are also poor. They are illiterate. They have no job skills. They are rickshaw pullers in India, for instance, and manual laborers who get paid so little that they're never going to be able to have a wife or a home. And so they go to the brothels for cheap sex with other people who are illiterate and who are being exploited. And it all comes back to poverty.
Hi, I'm Jason. Why did you leave Sold so open-ended?
Okay, show of hands, honest, truthful responses here. Who did not like the ending of Soul? You didn't find it satisfying? Nobody? Oh, okay, I see. Okay. That was intentional, not to make it unsatisfying, but to leave it open like that. Because I wanted the book to bother you. I wanted it to stay on your mind and have you engage in the creative process with me about what really happens to these girls. Do they like go back home and, you know, lead a normal life? No, they probably don't. And so if I took care of all the loose ends, the way you know, when you watch an episode of television, everything is resolved in 28 minutes or an hour, and you forget about it as soon as the show is over. But if it's left hanging, you engage with the material and with the problem a lot longer. I did write 50 or 60 more pages, and my editor said, no, this book ends at that pivot point, just at that moment where she's taking an action to gain her freedom. And I had written how she gets out and she feels the sunshine on her back for the first time and takes a bath and burns her clothes from the brothel. There was no energy in those pages. There was no conflict. There was no life to it. It was just a kind of dribbling off into nothingness. And so I often do workshops with students where I let them write their own ending. And depending on the age group, usually Mumtaz gets killed in a pretty violent way.
Well, our bell is about to ring.
Okay.
So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Thank you for setting up such a meaningful visit.
We loved it. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Okay, all right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.